Governments of the world, ye weary giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace, the new home of the mind. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past to leave us alone. You are not welcome among us. You have no sovereignty where we gather. I declare the social space that we are building to be naturally independent of the tyrannies you seek to impose upon us. You have no moral right to rule us, nor do you possess any means of enforcement that we have true reason to fear. This is the opening of John Perry Barlow's famous Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace in 1996. Barlow here is making two big claims in heady, sweeping rhetoric. It's a beautiful read, I suggest you read it in full. But at its core, Barlow's making a passionate plea on two main principles. The first is the descriptive claim. Barlow says that cyberspace, this new social spaces, the home of the mind, are naturally independent of the tyrannies that national governments seek to impose upon them. That is to say that cyberspace is a separate place that cannot be regulated by national sovereign states. The second claim is a normative claim, that even if sovereign states had some power in cyberspace, they have no legitimacy to set the rules for those who communicate online. That the rules created by the new inhabitants of these places, the communities that people are building online, will necessarily be better, have better rules, be better governed than any set of rules that could be imposed by any one or more national states. So the first argument that Barlow makes here is that the internet is inherently unregulable. You do not possess any means of enforcement that we have true reason to fear. And to understand this claim, you need to understand how the internet is structured. The internet, as its name implies, is a network of networks. It's a decentralized system of interconnected networks and independent network links between them. This means that the structure of the internet, the way it has been designed, means that it is resilient to control at any one point. As we'll see a little bit later on, Dan Gilmore famously put this as the net interprets censorship as damage and roots around it. So the internet, as we know it, spans the globe with no respect for jurisdictional or territorial boundaries. It connects billions of people all over the world in this massive interconnected series of networks. The people it connects can communicate largely anonymously, and it's hard for any government to be able to regulate the activities of the huge number of people or the enormous amount of content that people are generating and communicating over the internet. So Barlow's claim is that the structure of the internet makes it difficult or impossible for nation states to actually control it. If a website is shut down one day in one jurisdiction, it can be back up the next day in a completely different part of the world. It makes it incredibly difficult for governments to regulate the internet. Or if content is removed from one of these servers, some of the billions of people who are connected to the internet will often go to great pains to make sure that that content is available as soon as possible on as large a number of other servers as possible. This is an effect that we call the Streisand effect. So 20 years after Barlow's famous declaration, it turns out that the internet is not quite unregulable, not strictly speaking independent of the tyrannies, or naturally independent of the tyrannies of local governments. But it is extremely difficult to regulate. The fundamental point is that the internet's not a separate space. It's inhabited by real people in real locations at physical terminals around the world, subject to the very real laws of the governments who are sovereign in those spaces. Likewise, the pipes that people use to communicate are physical cables and wireless network links that exist as infrastructure in physical or meat space that is subject to territorial control. We see this really vividly in the stark examples of, say, for example, the Great Firewall of China, or here, the images of network traffic flowing to major Egyptian networks over the period of the January Revolution. And you can clearly see here the moment at which the Egyptian government, as it then was, sought to impose control over what data could come in and out of the country. And the government was able, within a fairly short time span, to shut down the major Egyptian network links. And you can see that obviously results in a massive disruption to the availability of content and communications in and out of Egypt at that time. So the internet, because it relies on physical infrastructure, because it's not a separate place, it is still fundamentally subject to the power of territorial governments. I mean, it is difficult, and we need to think about regulation in different ways in order for it to be effective.